Vistam 151, go around.
Go around, Vistam 151.
Vistam 151, heavy, thanks. The last departure lost the wheel on departure, so we're going to have to shut the runway down. So fly runway heading and maintain 3000.
Roger, Vistam 151.
Omnicon 7 heavy, we're going to have to...
Welcome to Brasher Warning, the podcast that dives deep into aviation incidents with sharp analysis, insightful discussions, and just a touch of edge. If you're passionate about aviation and love a good post-incident breakdown, you're in the right place. Before we take off, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with your crew. Let's get into it.
Okay, so this one is a little different, huh? It's July 16th, 1999, getting late, and a Piper Saratoga, piloted by, well, you know, John F. Kennedy Jr., is heading toward Martha's Vineyard. And I think everyone listening already knows it never actually makes it.
Yeah, and it's one of those events, you know, even with the NTSB reports like we have for this deep dive, it still feels, I don't know, there are these lingering questions.
Absolutely. And look, we're not here to speculate, not about, you know, conspiracy theories or anything like that. We have the reports.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. The reports themselves, they paint a pretty, a detailed picture, but it's, like you said, some things remain unanswered.
Okay, so let's jump in. The flight itself, where did things stand at the very beginning?
So the NTSB report, it takes us back to Essex County Airport in New Jersey. That's CDW. It was about 8:30 p.m. when JFK Jr. took off. And already, right from the get-go, there are reports, witnesses talking about the weather, saying it was hazy, particularly over the water. And there's this one detail that always gets me. From a witness on the ground, they said they saw the plane's right side door. It was like slightly open right before takeoff.
Wait, hold on. The door was open. Is that normal?
No, not at all. And it definitely becomes a point of, discussion in the report.
Okay, but for now, let's stick with the flight path. Did they at least make it out over the water?
They did. Radar tracked the Piper Saratoga over the water, passing Point Judith, Rhode Island, headed towards the Vineyard. Everything, at least on the radar, seems, I don't know, normal for a while.
Right. So then what changed?
The altitude. It's subtle at first. They were cruising at 5,500 feet. Then they go down to 2,200, which, hey, maybe air traffic, maybe something else, who knows. But then they climb back up. And it's then in the last, I guess you could say the last bit of the flight, that they go into this crazy fast descent.
How fast are we talking?
The radar data, it shows over 4,700 feet per minute.
That's incredibly fast, especially for, a small plane like that.
Yeah, it's a pretty clear sign that something went wrong, and it went wrong quickly. And here's another thing. No distress calls. He didn't radio for help. Nothing.
See, now that really adds to the mystery, right? Like, what was happening in those last few minutes?
It's hard to say, and that's part of why this deep dive is so, well, I don't know, I guess the word is intriguing, because it's not just what we know, but also what we don't.
And one of the things we know is that JFK Jr. was still a relatively new pilot, wasn't he? How much experience did he actually have?
He had gotten his pilot's license back in April of '98, so a little over a year. That's it. But, and this is important, he was training for his instrument rating at the time.
For someone who doesn't know, like me, what does that even mean, instrument rating?
Basically, learning to fly using the plane's instruments more than, what you can see out the window. Important when it's cloudy, when it's dark, when you can't, clearly see the horizon. His instructors, they said he was a good pilot, but he preferred, flying by sight when he could.
Which makes that haze the witnesses mentioned, well, even more of a factor, I'd imagine.
Yeah, you're right. And then on top of that, you've got another factor. JFK Jr. was actually recovering from a broken ankle surgery like a month before the crash.
Wow. Okay, I didn't realize it was that recent.
Yeah, he was even using a cane that day. So they really dug into whether the injury, could have impacted his ability to control the plane, especially if something went wrong.
So we're talking inexperienced pilot, hazy conditions, night flight, recent injury. It all just feels like, I don't know, a lot to factor in.
It is. It's a lot. And we haven't even gotten into, the specifics of that haze. That's where things get really interesting.
Yeah, and speaking of interesting, when they found the plane, what did they learn from the wreckage itself?
Well, they found it in about 120 feet of water, not too far off course, which is interesting, right? And the fuselage, the main body, it was actually largely intact, especially behind the wings.
Oh, wow. So it wasn't completely, obliterated on impact.
Not exactly, no. But, and this is key, the cockpit was totally destroyed, completely. And that detail, that along with the condition of the rest of the wreckage, it suggests, well, a high velocity impact. for sure. It had a pretty steep angle.
And that's where it gets scary when you start to think about the forces involved in something like that.
Absolutely. It's a sobering reminder.
It is. So the wreckage tells part of the story, but what about the plane itself? Did the NTSB find anything mechanically wrong, something that could, cause the crash?
And so they went through everything piece by piece. The engine, the propeller, both were fine. No signs of any problems before impact. They did, however, have some questions about the plane's autopilot system, and there was some stuff about the GPS too.
Okay, so not a smoking gun necessarily, but definitely something worth, looking into further.
For sure. But here's where things get tricky. Remember that whole thing with the witnesses, some saying the door was open, some saying it wasn't?
Yeah, I'm still stuck on that one, to be honest. Did they ever figure out what was going on with that?
It's a great example of, the limits of memory, I guess. Especially when you're talking about something happening so fast. People swear they saw the door open. Others, just as sure, said it was closed. The NTSB, they had to consider everything, angles, the time of day, even just how our minds can play tricks on us, after something traumatic happens.
Wow, so sometimes even eyewitness accounts, they aren't exactly reliable, huh?
Exactly. It's not always, cut and dry. And that's why those reports focus so much on the hard evidence, the stuff that's not open to interpretation.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've got the wreckage, the mechanics, and the whole door mystery. What about JFK Jr.'s ankle, his injury? Did the NTSB figure out if that was a factor?
They did. They actually brought in medical experts, to really analyze whether the broken ankle just a month before would have impacted how he could control the plane.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty important thing to figure out. What did they find?
So the consensus was, yeah, he probably could still use his left foot, enough to work the brakes. But, and this is a big but, they weren't sure he could have used the rudder pedals the way he needed to, especially in, a situation where he had to react quickly.
And the rudder pedals, those are what controlling which way the nose of the plane is pointing.
Exactly, the yaw.
Yeah.
And that's where we circle back to those hazy conditions, because now it's not just about seeing where you're going, but also feeling it, sensing it, and trusting your instincts, even when maybe they're wrong.
Because if you can't see the horizon...
Right, and you're relying on, I don't know, maybe what your body's telling you, you might not even realize you're in trouble until it's too late.
And that's what makes this whole thing, I don't know, it adds this whole other level to it.
And the NTSB report, it even talks about this thing called the black hole effect.
The black hole effect. Okay, now that sounds a little ominous.
Yeah, and basically it happens when pilots are flying at night. Overwater, no moon, no lights, just, blackness. Your inner ear, which helps you balance, it can trick you into thinking you're flying straight when you're actually not.
Oh, wow. So you're basically flying blind, but you don't even realize it.
And your instruments might be telling you one thing, but your brain, it's getting all these, mixed signals. And suddenly you have no idea which way is up, which way is down, and you lose control.
Yeah, it's like all your senses they betray you, and you're just, you're lost up there.
Which makes me think about, those last few minutes of JFK Jr.'s flight, we know there weren't any distress calls, but did the NTSB reports find any kind of explanation for why he wouldn't have, radioed for help?
It's probably the biggest question that's still out there, even with all the investigation. There are a couple of things to think about, though. One, and this is just, speculation, but with the plane going down so fast, maybe it all happened too quickly. No time to react, no time to even pick up the radio. So it was just, bam, that fast.
It's possible. Or, and this is another possibility, maybe there were warning signs, subtle ones, the kind an experienced pilot would recognize, but because JFK Jr. was, still relatively new to all of this, maybe he missed them, especially at night. Everything's just, it's harder in the dark, isn't it?
Right. And then we have that whole black hole effect thing. If you're disoriented, if you don't even know you're in trouble.
Yeah, you're not going to call for help because as far as you know, everything's fine.
Until it's not. Okay, but what about the autopilot, the GPS? We talked about how those were maybe not working perfectly. Could those have caused the crash?
They could have, absolutely. And the NTSB, they looked into all of that. But, and it's a big but, the cockpit voice recorder, he was never found.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we don't actually know what was going on in those last few minutes, what JFK Jr. was saying, what, if anything, the instruments were telling him. Mm-hmm. We don't know.
So it's like even with all the evidence, with all the reports, we're still left with this, this feeling of what if, right? Like, what if they'd found that voice recorder?
Exactly. And that's how it is sometimes, even with these big investigations. You can have all the wreckage, the data, the witnesses, But sometimes the answers, they're just not there.
It's kind of humbling in a way, isn't it? Makes you realize we don't always have all the answers.
We don't, not always. But that doesn't mean, and this is important, it doesn't mean we stop looking. We keep asking questions, we keep learning, and maybe, just maybe, we get a little bit closer to understanding, what really happened.
And hopefully prevent it from happening again. So for anyone listening, this whole deep dive has been, well, for me at least, it's been a real eye-opener. You go into these things and you think, you know the story, but then you dig into the NTSB reports and it's like, whoa, there's a lot more to this than I realized.
That's the point, right? To get past those headlines, those quick summaries and actually see the complexity. And who knows, maybe this is just the beginning for some of our listeners. Maybe they'll go out and, start researching spatial disorientation. Or maybe they'll look into what it takes to, become a pilot, get their instrument rating. Learning never stops.
It doesn't.
And with that, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us, everyone, as we explored this incredibly complex and really tragic event. And to everyone listening, until next time, we'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Thanks for tuning in to Brasher Warning. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you never miss a flight with us. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment or review, and don't forget to share the podcast with your fellow aviation enthusiasts. Until next time, stay sharp, stay safe, and keep soaring.
American 1552, contact center 127.0.
1552, we're going to be Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. We have an engine failure. We're going to return to DFW.
1552, roger. And which runway do you need?
We'll take 18 right.
Roger, American 1552, turn right heading 020, descend and maintain 8,000.